Okay. Thank you everyone for coming out here on such a beautiful day in downtown Raleigh. We're here to talk to you about what's going on in our General Assembly in North Carolina. I'm Randy Voller, the chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party. I'm joined up here by fellow Democrats. I have Lewis Duke here, who's the president of the College Democrats. I also have Representative Alma Adams, who's got a long and storied history with civil rights and representing people in North Carolina. We are all here to speak to you. We also have Dan Blue III, who's the chair of the Wake County Democratic Party, and David Bland, who's with Democratic Men. Obviously, it's even difficult for us to track all the things that are happening in the General Assembly. From the issue with the Dick's lease here, which shows that they're willing to rip up anything and start anew against the will of the people, to what they're doing with voter rights, I, as a mayor in North Carolina and a leader of this party, am extremely disappointed. I have here a copy of a wonderful paper showing our former governor, Bev Perdue, getting a Civil Rights Award in D.C. for her work on the Wilmington 10. It's actually the Torch Award. I'd like to contrast that with what's going on in the General Assembly. They're attempting to torch us on our rights to vote. This is a story of a legislature who, after cutting unemployment benefits, after raising taxes on working families, after restricting your access to health care, now they seek the most austere measures of all. They seek to cut off the right and access of people to vote. This is the story of 7 deadly attacks on your right to vote. Number 1 is requiring a photo ID to vote. And if that's not bad enough, number 2, they want to cut early voting. They want to end same-day registration. They actually want to tax parents who are working to put their kids through college. They want to disenfranchise ex-felons who have paid their price and are now trying to be functional citizens in society. They want to ban so-called mentally incompetent voters, and they want to end straight ticket voting. These are 7 attacks on your freedoms to vote. This, to me, sounds like an attack on personal freedom. This sounds like a government gone amok, except, ironically, it's coming from the right, who always claims to believe in these things, but when put into power by the voters in North Carolina, they are attacking you, the citizen. Apparently, they don't want you to express your right to vote at the polls. Now, we can talk a little bit about public opinion. We know that when public opinion tends to support their position, they're out there trumpeting it day in and day out. Well, these days, it's less apparent that it's on their side. Let's review the numbers. 78% approximate of North Carolinians support early voting. Again, 78%. Now, as a local mayor, I can attest to you, we hardly get 78% of people to agree on anything, including that we have gravity in our community. For 78% of North Carolinians to agree on this is something that they should pay attention to. 68% of North Carolinians actually support keeping straight ticket voting. And 53% of North Carolinians support the option for early voting on Sundays, which has affectionately been called souls to the polls. With that kind of broad-based support from Democrats to unaffiliates to Republicans, I'm wondering why it is so important to invest so much time and effort in our General Assembly monkeying with our right to vote. It seems to me that Speaker Tillis and Majority Leader Berger are growing bureaucracy and creating programs that are going to cost more money and more time to enforce without actually any study of what this is not only going to cost the people of North Carolina in terms of their actual treasure, but is going to cost them in terms of their access to voting. It's bad enough that they gerrymander themselves into a position to pick the voter, but now they're not even satisfied with those voters. They want to ensure that very few show up. You know, they say that they want to stop folks from impersonating people at the polls, and as I've pointed out before, the actual example of this, 1 in 21 million, I'm more likely to be struck by lightning than you actually witnessing this. I feel that we need to find out who's impersonating the legislators up there. I mean, the people elected people to come into office and work for the good of North Carolina. Who are these folks? Perhaps we need to institute a good old-fashioned return policy. I'm not so sure that Tar Heels have received in these last elections what they bargained for. We know that they're proposing solutions that are in search of problems. There is no broad-based problem with voting in this state. The only problem that I see is that demography is changing and they want to change the rules in the middle of the game. And this is a time-old tradition that when things aren't going to work out your way, you suddenly rip up the contract, like the Dix lease, and try to reimpose new rules that you like. This is simply unfair and not right and not transparent. These guys are trying to infringe on personal liberty and freedom. They've entered into a very dangerous game, and they're playing political football with people's futures for partisan gain. And that is something that the Democratic Party opposes. And I want to be clear, when I'm out here speaking to the people of North Carolina, I'm not speaking just for the Democrats' right to vote. I'm speaking for the right for everyone to have access to vote. And that's an important distinction. By cutting people's access to early voting and putting amendments into bills or running bills that would say we could have one early voting site or early voting could be open only between the hours of 2 and 3 on odd Tuesdays or whatever crazy idea they have, they are actually telling the citizens that we don't want to hear from you, and that is simply not right. It's time for this governor, who ran as a moderate, to rein in this radical reactionary state legislature and lead. It's time for this governor to tell them, as Bev Perdue did, that he will veto bills that are not good for the citizens of North Carolina. I do not see that he or any of us want a legacy of longer lines, less access to voting, and making people feel that they are not part of the democracy in this state. Now, I would like to introduce now Louis Duke, who's the president of the College Democrats, and he would like to make a few comments about how he feels about what's going on with voter rights in North Carolina.
Thank you, Chairman Voller. Students across our state are raising the alarm on the Republican Party's latest attempts to stifle our votes, this time in the form of a tax increase on our parents. Senate Bills 666 and 667 would end the state tax exemption for eligible parents if their college student is registered to vote outside of their home address. North Carolina Republicans are so desperate to suppress the youth vote in our state that they are willing to increase taxes on our hard-working parents. For many students, the decision of where to go to college is based on so much more than a place to live for 4 years. Many students remain in these communities long after graduation to work a job, buy a house, and grow a family. So many universities across this state instill a strong foundation of local involvement with their students. We know our communities. We live, work, and engage in these cities and towns that so many of us consider home. We have a vested interest in our communities. We have a vested interest in exercising our right to vote in our communities. This is really about stifling a demographic that the Republican Party in this state has failed to attract election after election. And when North Carolina students see legislation that would tax our parents, cut early voting on our campuses, and put up barriers at the ballot box, students rejecting Republican proposals time and time again should not be a surprise. Above all, we reject the Republican notion that we cannot think for ourselves or vote for the interests of our communities. This is short-sighted and cynical, something this Republican legislature has been known for far too often. The bottom line for students across this state is this: voters pick the politicians, politicians don't pick the voters. We call on the Republican legislature and Governor McCrory to stop toying with democracy for political gain. North Carolina is better served when every voter has the right to cast a ballot in their community. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. I'd now like to introduce Representative Adams, who is a veteran of the General Assembly, serving over 10 terms representing Guilford County. She has been on the front lines fighting for civil rights and voting rights throughout her distinguished career, and we're proud to stand with her today as we continue to hold the Republican leadership accountable for their attempts to curb voting rights in this state. Representative Adams.
Thank you, Chair Voller. Since taking the majority, North Carolina Republican lawmakers have set out on a warpath to attack our voting rights and infringe on your personal liberty. Today, Democrats stand with citizens across the state in sending a clear signal. We support your personal freedom and liberty to cast a vote at the ballot box. For years, Democrats have expanded access to the ballot box. Early voting has become a centerpiece in our elections, and now Republicans seek to roll that legacy backward. From intrusive voter ID, to limiting early voting, to ending same-day registrations, Republicans are making it quite transparent that they don't believe that they can win the battle of ideas or stand on the merits of their proposals. So they'd rather make it harder for you, the citizens, to cast your vote. It is a perversion of power to toy with democracy for partisan gain. This is an out-and-out Republican effort to make it harder for voters to hold their radical extreme proposals accountable at the ballot box. We've already seen the systematic failure of curbing early voting in battleground states. Why then would we emulate such failures for our own voters? We already know that Florida election officials have called limiting early voting a nightmare. Well, my friends, the nightmare has come to Jones Street. On the test of championing personal freedom, of protecting your constitutional right to cast a ballot, this Republican legislature has failed the citizens of North Carolina. Republican leadership seeks to create bureaucratic headaches for our voters to delude their voice at the ballot box. Republican leadership seeks to stifle those who don't agree with them by shutting down souls to the polls, by ending Sunday voting, or taxing parents working to put their kids through college. All the while, we're left rootless when it comes to what actually matters to North Carolinians: growing our economy, expanding opportunity, and investing in education. Republican lawmakers have it all wrong. It's time for Governor McCrory, Speaker Tillis, and Leader Berger to rein in this insanity and partisan trickery and focus on what matters most. Voters have the right to cast a free and fair ballot in North Carolina. Republicans are set on a path to make democracy a political football for partisan gain. That's not how we do business as Democrats. We expand access, we create opportunity, and we invest in our communities. Republican leadership would do well to remember that many have been jailed or died for the freedom to have our voices heard at the ballot box. It's a fight. If it's a fight that Republicans want to limit that freedom, it's a fight they're going to get. Thank you.
I think you've heard from us today that we're going to be very strong on this, and we feel that for all North Carolinians, these bills should either go away or be well thought out before they're introduced to the people. You're looking at us talking behind a lectern that was built in Chatham County by a personal friend of mine, constructed personally for me to let other people use, as opposed to how they run bills in there, which is essentially the Walmart model of legislation. Let Alec, whoever, craft it and send it right here to North Carolina. I expect our legislators to go to Raleigh and deliberate and think on behalf of North Carolinians, not come in there and unleash a veritable torrent of bills that we have no idea what's in there, but what we do know when we read them, they're bad for North Carolinians. We're open for questions, and both Representative Adams and Louis Duke would be happy to take questions privately with folks who want to interview them.